Don't be afraid to engage a realtor. Don't be afraid to talk to a professional. We're here to be your advocate. We're here to help so that you don't make a bad decision and really help guide how that decision is going to work.
Welcome, everybody, to the Warrior Podcast. My name is Frank Lardino. I'm here with my special guest and dear friend, Marty Walsh. Say hi, Marty.
Hi, Marty.
On our last podcast, we talked about the changes happening in the real estate market that are not going to be favorable to consumers. We concluded that podcast by saying now more than ever, it's probably a good idea if you're looking to buy a home to have professional representation in the form of a realtor. And today we're going to talk about the value of a good realtor and what a good realtor will do for you. And before we start, I just wanted to say special thanks to Keller Williams Preferred, my real estate brokerage, and my partner, Ivette, Hollendoner, who could not be here today. We are the Velocity Real Estate Group. When we started our business, Ivette and I found each other by chance, which was a beautiful thing. Ivette and I had the same mission. It wasn't to be the biggest. It was to be the best realtors that we could be, to create the very best customer experience, to be a 5-star team, not a 4.5-star team, not a 4.8-star team, but a 5-star team. And to that end, we knew that we would have to self-educate ourselves, take classes, learn things to make us better at what we do. One of the things that I did right out of real estate school is I went to home inspection school, and I did that because I really wanted to know the components of a home, how everything worked together, how an air conditioning system worked, how a furnace worked, and things like that, because I wanted to make sure that I was actually being an agent to protect my clients from getting into potentially a money pit. For instance.
Well, I think we got into the business around the same time. And what is kind of unique is that we came out of a business together, from trading. We got into real estate, and your team with Ivette is very similar to the vast majority of my time in real estate was with a team that was the same makeup. I had a female partner, Heidi. And it was a really good team environment. And in the male-female thing, you can't ignore that. It was a very good, I used to always joke that everybody thought I was the tough guy in the relationship. And I was like, you guys got no idea what it's like when we walk out of here. Like, she's the tough one. Right. So, it's those kinds of things, but I agree 1,000% that, you make each other better. Just to talk about a little bit about like what a really good realtor does, what a really good real estate agent does. When I got into the business and was early in the business, I was part of a group with Heidi. That's how we got to know each other. And we created a group of, younger, for lack of a better way of putting it, agents. And we would get together, I think it was once a month, or maybe it was every other week. We would get together, and there were 5 or 6 of us, and each of us would have an assignment to go out and learn something new and bring it back to the group, right? And that's important because there isn't, you have to seek out a lot of this education. Like you said, you went to learn how to be an inspector so that you would know about the components of a home. Like, what does it mean? What are the different kind of roofing materials? As boring as that is to the consumer, it's super important to the longevity of their house, and their investment. So we set about very intentionally to master, I hate to be sound Hollywoody, but to master the craft. Right. Really to really try to know all the things that you could possibly know. And, you just can't. Number one, there's a ton to know. But it's a constant learning experience. And the partnership that I had was phenomenal for that. And then we even bounced, we got together as, working at different brokerages and that kind of stuff. You and Ivette and Heidi and I would get together and discuss stuff, everything from marketing to, we had a crazy deal go sideways. What would you have done?
We'll talk about the different stages of a deal for the people out there who haven't been through it yet. When we're working with buyers, the first thing we do is we establish the wants and needs of the buyer. Once we establish the wants and needs for the buyer, and those components will be, what area do they want to live in, the type of home, beds, baths, etc. School systems may be a concern. We accumulate all the criteria for our buyer client, and then we construct a search. Sometimes buyers are leery that they'll ask you, well, how many homes have you sold in Plainfield, Illinois, for instance? Well, I may have not sold any homes in Plainfield, Illinois. That doesn't mean I can't gain the expertise quickly. I can pull up enough information about Plainfield, the sales of homes in Plainfield, the absorption rate of homes in Plainfield, and start watching that market from day one, every single day, twice a day. And I can quickly become a market expert of Plainfield. And that's one of the things that Marty and I have done throughout our career. Same thing applies with listings. We get a referral for a listing that's in an area we've never worked before. I don't know what you do, but I look at all the listings every single day, what comes on the market, what goes under contract, who's the agents that are doing business out there, and I watch all the stuff, the pricing trends every single day. So when a competing home comes on the market for a listing I have, I'll make an appointment and go see it, because I want to make sure that my pricing is competitive in the marketplace. And that's what I tell the seller at the listing presentation. I'm going to actually be looking at homes to make sure we're staying competitive with the things that are coming on the market. And I'll do that even in advance of a listing presentation. I'll look at the house I'm going to look at, and I'll say, I've already looked at this house for sale in your neighborhood, and here's how yours compares.
The reason that you have the ability to look at a market that necessarily you haven't done a bunch of transactions in that market and be able to understand that market is because you're extrapolating the knowledge that you have from all the markets that you work in, right? Not to oversimplify it, but housing is kind of housing, right? Homes are kind of homes. Now they're all very different. You have all these things that go on with it, but from a market dynamic thing, it's inventory, it's interest rates, it's what the rate of sales happening, and those kinds of things. Like a stock analyst can be looking at the automotive industry and maybe move over to the pharmaceutical industry because a lot of the same things apply. So when you become an expert at what you're doing, you can then refocus that expertise onto something else. So it's, I just wanted to make sure that it's not like you just get your license and you go flying out to Plainfield and you're the expert in Plainfield. It's because you've spent enough time getting good at all the things that you do that adding another market to your expertise becomes easier.
You could actually be a resourceful newer agent and not have even had the experience yet, but you can plunge yourself into it. You can utilize the resources out of your office. You can go to the people who are in the know, right, and extract the wisdom of tenured agents, right? That's what we do.
That's one of the great things about the industry is that if you're with a good brokerage and you're with a good group of people in the office, you may be competitors, which is unique to our experience because we used to stand in the trading pit and compete with each other and compete with other people. And yet you still had to have relationships with them, even though you were competing, right? So you can sit in the same office as people and compete with them, but also have, the depth of their knowledge, right? I mean, I started selling on the North Shore, north of Chicago, and there were some agents that had been selling for, 25, 35 years up there that had been in and out of every house, multiple times. Why wouldn't I use their knowledge, right? And that's how you gain, you just have to be willing to put the work in and learn.
Right. And there was a time where we didn't have one sale under our belt.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we're sitting in front of people and they're like, well, how many houses have you sold? And, you'd be honest with them and say, I haven't sold a house yet. I'm new at this, but I have a really good team, experience. They're behind me. And, I'm going to do a really good job for you. Yeah, and
you could say, well, Mr. Seller, if we're really lucky, the first one's going to be you.
That's good. So when we represent a buyer, there's in my opinion, many more moments involved with representing a buyer. You are sending out notifications to them when a new house comes on the market that fits their criteria. What a lot of agents do is they create the search on the multiple listing service and that search will run automatically, and that search will send properties to the client automatically. And then they have the option to check a box interested, and if they do that, the property will be saved, and then we can go in on the back end and we can see the saved properties. What I like to do is I search the properties every day myself, and I look at them before I send them to the client because I want to know what I'm sending them. And then once you start taking them out, you start to learn their tastes. So when a good property comes on that you feel like is right in their bullseye, I will email it to them, and then I'll text them in the morning. And I'll say, I just sent you one. It looks really sweet. Let me know what you think. If it's a hot market and they can't get out to look at the property within a day or two, I'll go take a look at it myself and report to them, the house is all that, or no, the pictures kind of falsely depicted it, and the house is more of a wreck than anything.
And that's I mean, I agree 1,000%. And that's where kind of the expertise of knowing what you're looking at, knowing what your client, and we can circle back to that, but knowing what your client wants. And then, if they're at work, trying to make the money to buy the house, and, something pops up and they're like, I just can't, I can't leave work. And that's what they're paying us for,
right? Is
to go over there and go, you know what, you said you didn't want, white cabinets. And so either you're going to have to paint these or accept white cabinets, right? Like the white cabinets didn't show up in the picture, or for whatever reason, the layout wasn't something that you wanted, or the basement wasn't as big as it looked in the pictures, whatever the issue is. That's the service that they're paying for. They're paying us a decent amount of money to go out and alleviate those things. One of the things that I like to tell sellers or buyers is that, we're not trying to find the perfect house. We're trying to, separate the wheat from the chaff, right? We may not find the perfect house, but what we're going to do is eliminate all the ones that don't check the right boxes. And then we're going to figure out, what is acceptable and what's not. Even if you had $10 million, you're going to build your brand new house. There's always trade-offs, right? Some things you're going to get, some things you're not. What's most important, what's not most important. To go back to your point earlier of like figuring out what they want, the checklist, we talk about mission creep. You get a buyer, we always joke about this kind of stuff. You get a buyer that's looking for, a 2-bedroom condo with a one parking space in the building. And 3 weeks into looking at houses, you're looking at $800,000 6-bedroom houses, you're like, wait a minute, let's go back to the initial mission here. The mission's creeped a little bit. So those kinds of things that are really important. And
then at that juncture, it's not out of line for either of us to tell the client about, the house port lecture. Like, hey, I'll help you find whatever you're looking for, but we were starting at a $350 price point, and now we're at $800, and I want to make sure you know what you're getting into. I don't want you to become house poor, right?
Yeah, and that's. I mean, I really feel like that's where our expertise comes in, because it's in this day and age where it's 2024. People can go on the internet, they can Google stuff up, they can go to all the portals, and they can look and they can get enough information. And there's a little bit of a like watching a YouTube video and then thinking you can take apart your car engine, right? And then taking apart your car engine and realizing you got a problem now. I really don't know what I'm doing. And so I think for the consumer, they can do all the searching, they can do all of that. They can try to eliminate neighborhoods and houses based on school reviews and all those things, all the things that they're looking for for the area they want to live in. But at the end of the day, we kind of get perceived as, well, I got to call a realtor in order to unlock the door so that I can see the house. Well, that's like the easiest part of the job, I would say, is, going there, meeting them, walking through the house, finding out whether they like it or not. But, that's not just locating the house. Even if you found your perfect house, now what? Like, how do you buy it? What does a contract look like? How do you borrow the money? What is the cost of borrowing the money? What is a 7.5% interest rate with an 8% APR? What's the difference of that? What are we actually talking about? What does that mean? Most people don't have the time to understand that. And that's where I think that the expertise of a buyer agent really comes into play, it's not locating the house, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus or anything like that, but basically anybody can find a house, unless it's through our network of people that we know that something's coming on and it's not public yet. I mean, that's right. When you get to know a lot of agents, you get to know a lot of that stuff. You hear the scuttlebutt, somebody's getting ready, thinking about moving, somebody's got something coming on, those kinds of things. Then finding the house becomes a a real value add from an agent's perspective. But for the most transactions, they're going to find them because they're listed, they're in the portals, those kinds of things. But it's the transaction itself. How do I acquire the house? What does that look like? What's the insurance payment going to look like on this house? You might be able to afford the principal and interest, but with these days, especially in 2024, and insurance rates skyrocketing like crazy, that could change the whole dynamic.
You know what I just learned last week after doing this for so long? I didn't realize that a lot of insurance carriers, they don't want to insure a house with a cedar roof. I never knew that. At least now it's because the insurance industry is getting tighter. I didn't know that. So now moving forward with a client, if they like a house with a cedar roof, and by the way, I can visually look at roofs, regular asphalt shingle roofs, and I can tell in general what type of condition they're in. I could also, if I can see from an upstairs bedroom window and look close to the shingles, I can get a pretty accurate depiction of the condition of the roof. But cedar roofs, I don't have expertise on that. So when I took these clients to this house, I did my realtor thing with my home inspection expertise, and I was looking at all the stuff, and I said, I'm going to tell you flat out right now, I don't have expertise on cedar roofs. The roof looks okay, but I'm not sure. So if this is the house you want to move on, see what the home inspector says, and you might need a roofing specialist to come out during the inspection period. And that's exactly what happened. And then that's when I found out the homeowners insurance companies, a lot of them don't even want to cover, or it's super expensive to cover a house with a cedar roof. And I've just found that interesting.
Yeah. And I've dealt with in my career a lot of different states and a lot of different areas of the country. Like in Florida, people that can't get hurricane insurance anymore. You can't get water penetration insurance. You can't get, insurance for your roof. And then the policies themselves really change a lot too, because there are some policies that are replacement value, and then there are some policies that are depreciated replacement value. You're paying a different premium, and you're also paying a different deductible for those things. And what does that look like? What do those things look like when it comes into the total cost of the home? There's a lot of people in Florida that are losing their insurance because they can't afford that. Even in Louisiana, down where there's a hurricane, those people are losing their insurance. And then like in California, Northern California and stuff like that, I actually have a friend who lives in Northern California who can't get fire insurance. You can get regular homeowners insurance and all that, but there's no fire policy. So they have to buy a state fire policy. And for like a $700,000 house in California, which is kind of rare to find,
right,
but for a $700,000 house, it's valued. The fire premium is like $10,000.
Wow.
And so if you don't, that's what you need a buyer agent. Honestly, I know we're in the business of selling houses, but a consumer may not get all that information. And if you're buying a resale house from somebody, they're not obligated to give you that information unless you ask for it. So you may not know that you just bought a house that has a $10,000 insurance premium, that you weren't accounting for. So it's really, there's a lot, and you don't know those things until you get the experience of it.
It's really an add value if an agent can dissect the components of a home. Ivette and I, we taught a class. It's a 3-hour presentation, Building a Warrior Realtor, in which we talked about many things. We talked about mindset and, negotiations, which we'll get around to. But we got to a section where we had a few slides of home inspection reports. Now, between Ivette and I, because we attend all of the home inspections, we've sat through probably cumulatively 1,000 home inspections. She didn't go to home inspection school, and neither did you, but you've had enough home inspections that you've read through that you could probably pass the home inspection test, right?
The last home inspection that I did, when the report came, it was 144 pages.
Wow.
144 pages. Now, a lot of those are pictures, but 144-page inspection report.
It's a lot of data.
For a 3,800 square foot house. Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of data.
A lot of stuff in there.
It's very beneficial on the front end when you're looking at a house to identify problems. And some of those problems are structural. Like, I have a really good feel for when there's level changes on the floor. Like, why is this whole part of the house, on an angle lower right at the midpoint? And it's because there's a severe settling issue. And then we'll go outside and you'll see the fractures in the brick. And I'm like, this looks like a heavy duty problem that you probably would want an engineer to come out and look at, right?
Yeah.
And if on the front end you can identify stuff, then you can rule the stuff out. Sometimes they really love the house and you give them like the warning signs and stuff and they get the home inspection. And, we're not here to tell people not to buy a house, but we've covered our bases.
Whenever I go into a house and the owner of the house is a labeler, right? They put labels on stuff. I know they're taking care of their house.
Oh yeah.
Because anybody that's that anal that is like this light switch turns on that outlet, right? You know what I mean? And they label everything in the electric box and all this, like you open a drawer and all the dish towels are folded. You're like, oh, this is going to be a good house.
I was in a house like that where the lady of the house in the master closet, she had all of her shoes in clear plastic bins, and then she had a Polaroid picture of the shoes on top so she could look at a glance and see what's inside the box. I'm like, yeah, they're taking care of their stuff here, Yeah,
those are the kind of people that like wash the inside of their washing machine, right? You know what I mean? Like, and you're just like, this is going to be a good house. And those are great. And that's, that takes time to understand that, it does. That's a funny aside, but that's those kind of things that like you're just like, oh yeah, this is gonna be good.
Yeah, and you can tell when a home's been well taken care of, even if you don't see labels. You can just tell while you're walking through
I like to look at the air filter. Like if the air filter hasn't been changed in like 6 years, you're like, oh,
yeah, I love that. And it's nice to be able to tell somebody this is a well taken care of home.
Mm-hmm.
So. And that one with the cedar roof was that very thing. It was a well taken care of home.
Yeah, just because somebody has a cedar roof or there's a challenging architecture to the house or there's challenging things to the house, it doesn't mean that it's a negative. You know what I mean? It may require a little bit more maintenance. The whole thing about a buyer is that you want them to see the house with wide open eyes, right? Because buyer, they get excited about a house. They want to see the house, kind of traditional sales-y things is to keep that excitement going.
Yeah,
right?
I hate that, by the way.
Oh, God. I mean, you keep that excitement going. Yeah, it's going to be great. You can put your kid in this room. You can do that, like all that. You try to get that all zhuzhed up and like, oh, hey, or sign right here. You're like, that drives me nuts. So it's you really want them and sometimes you end up being the bummer. You know what I mean? Like, I don't,
right.
So I just want anybody that I represent on the buy side and any agents that I train to represent on the buy side to make sure that your buyer sees everything they need to see and that they are wide open. The eyes are wide open as to what is going on in that house. Because people may buy a problem, right? And knowing that the problem is there and they're okay with spending the money, the time, and the effort to fix that problem or make it the way that they want it to be. As long as they're aware of it, the knowledge is the key to all of that for a buyer.
Right. And then sometimes it's just, it's our experience perspective. A lot of times I'll say to somebody, the power lines are in close proximity or the road noise is, a little bit louder because we're close to a busy street. And while that may not bother you, it will bother some people at resale time. So you need to know that you're going to get some negative feedback from that could affect your value down the road,
so
right?
One of the tricks in Arizona is a buyer agent, right? Anybody who wants to buy a house in a warm climate, make sure you turn off. If you go to the house and they got the fountains and everything shooting water into the pool, turn all that off because that's a road noise cover. Right. They got the spa running. It's dripping water. It's the waterfalls coming into the pool pumps running, all that kind of stuff. You turn all that off and all of a sudden you can hear the 303. Right.
Oh, wow.
All the UPS trucks are going
awesome.
by.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things. That's what I mean by like the consumer, doesn't have the time to look at all that stuff. And that's why I really think that they need, as corny and goofy as maybe that story sounds like, those are the things that make a difference. Imagine selling that house to somebody and having the pool pump turn off at night and all of a sudden it's road noise right outside their master bedroom or within a block away and there's nothing you can do about it.
And if you're someone sensitive to that and you buy the house, you've just purchased a nightmare.
You just purchased a nightmare. And for me, as a professional that really does care about putting people in the right place and giving them the right product that they want, that's a failure to me. I take that personally.
I do too.
You know what I mean? That's something that I dropped the ball on for them. And well, maybe legally I don't have like it wasn't my fault or whatever. You can kind of do that kind of thing. But, I do feel like that's my responsibility to know those things for them. Because
right.
They're too busy. The average person is too busy going to work, taking their kid to school, taking their kid to the after school thing, trying to, deal with their family. Everybody's got the fun parts of dealing with their families and their lives and their jobs and stuff like that. But, they're just trying to get by. They shouldn't have to be an expert in something, but especially since they can hire somebody who's the expert in it that can guide them through the process.
Right. And I also, I tap into my experience with my own house. I hired a builder and I wasn't subcontracting everything, but I would come here at the different phases of the build process. So I learned about, that, but it's the layout and the functionality of the house. I've had this house for almost 30 years. I raised 3 kids and now 2 grandkids have, been born in this house. And we like to entertain. So I'll be in a house with buyers and I'll see a layout of a kitchen family room. And if it's closed off where, you can't see the family room from the kitchen, I'll tell them, if you're entertaining and for togetherness or whatever, this is the optimum. And this is why people are looking for open floor plan, which I have. And I love it because you could be in the kitchen doing your thing. It's a straight shot in the family room. I got a big TV on the wall.
And let's talk about the fact that you did that, 28 years ago? You were the open floor plan. You were already looking at open floor plan stuff. They weren't necessarily building all these open floor plan houses back then. They were still separating kitchens with a wall and stuff. And now everybody's kind of taking that down. But so you were thinking ahead as to this is an entertaining house. We want it to be open.
Yep. And then, I'm a kitchen guy and I used to be a restaurant owner. So I've even picked out things that are not optimum in the functionality of a kitchen, even in a nice house. These people who bought the house with the cedar roof, the house we were in right in before that, which we did offer, I noticed that the stovetop was tucked in real tight against the refrigerator. And I'm like, there's no room to spread out. You need a little room to spread out on either side of the range because I know this from my own personal experience. He's like, I didn't even think about that. Where would I put this, that, and the other thing?
You got to put the dirty spatula and the other extra bowl on the side.
Exactly right. So that's another thing. And then this is just a sidebar because you and I, we have a male-female team for the bulk of our career. And I found it very, very beneficial when a couple's divorcing. Because when they're at odds with each other, Ivette and I will just peel off, and Ivette will stay with the wife, and I will stay with the husband, and that seems to keep everything at the most peaceful level that it can be at.
I'll tell you a divorce listing story. I took this listing, and I was working with a guy, and it was just every nightmare scenario that you could talk about a contentious divorce was happening. Every time I had a showing, I had to email both the husband and the wife, and they each had an attorney and a paralegal. I had emailed 6 people. 6 people had to okay every showing, every single showing. 6 people. I had to. So you got a good house. People are coming to look at it. I'm trying to get showing stuff like that, man. And they, you can't get people to, a divorcing situation, and that's where that's really where you become a professional and you take the emotion out of it. This is a business transaction now. We're trying to figure out what's the best for everybody in this scenario here. Here's how this is going to work out. And you really you cannot be timid in that situation.
No.
You've got their attorneys involved. You've got them mad at each other. And if you're not leading that parade, they are going to lead you all over the place.
Yes, because they're high in emotion and you have to be firm and bring the emotion down. I'll tell you my divorce story where we figured out, Ivette and I, to separate, she stays with the wife and I stay with the husband. I received a call from an agent that I don't know. And she said, I checked out your profile and here's the situation. My best friend is getting a divorce. It's not a amicable divorce. They're going to need to sell their house. I've vetted a bunch of agents in your town, and I've determined that because you and your partner are more mature, this is going to take, by mature, she meant our age. She's like, this is going to be a real tough. I don't want any referral for it. I just want you to take care of my best friend and her husband and get the house sold. And you can never tell them that I talked to you. I go, well, then how are they going to know to call me? And she goes, well, the husband will call you and you do your listing presentation. You're going to have to earn the business and, he's going to say he just found you and, read your reviews and stuff. So we go there, we do the listing presentation. They're agitated with each other, and this, okay, we'll list with you. So we're going through the thing, and the lady she liked to day drink, and it'd be very hard to talk to her sometimes during the day. And I remember being at home and I was doing dishes. It was like 8:00 at night, and she's screaming at me on the phone, and she's like, "You're effing just like every other man. You don't care about me." Whoa, I go, we need to tone that down. Okay. So anyway, I call up the agent who referred me to this lady who was her best friend. And I said, what do I need to do? I want to make sure I'm handling them correctly. She goes, don't ever talk to her after 4 p.m. Firstly.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, she sounds like she's anti-man. I go, is it okay if I ask Ivette, like when we communicate, we'll communicate the same message, but Ivette will talk to her and I'll talk to the guy. And she's like, that's fine. So we kept the peace, the deal closed. And then the end of the story is the realtor who referred the business to me was having an affair with the husband.
I knew that was coming.
And that's why she said you could never tell.
I knew that was coming.
And the wife knew about it too. So she knew that if the realtor was mentioned, that they would never use us. But that's where we learned like kind of how to divide our abilities to keep the peace. And we just do it automatically now. So
yeah, we should pull in 3 or 4 agents and just tell crazy stories.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely do that.
The beauty of your partnership that you have, and the partnership that I had for a very long time, was that, I always knew that if somebody called and asked her a question, because people always, a lot of times, people, and rightly so, they're suspicious and they want to make sure they're not getting played. They're not getting told a story by one person that's different than another. I always knew, and anybody who wants to pick up the phone and call Ivette or Frank, you're going to get the same answer, right? Because you're going to get the same answer because we always tell the truth, right? There's no, in sales, people get kind of, trying to get the sale done and all that kind of stuff. In real estate and in residential home sales, everybody should strive to tell the truth, but you should never stretch the truth at all. You should never have any of that kind of going on. And if you call my partner, she's going to give you the exact same answer that I'm going to give you, because the answer is apparent. The answer is generally, it's generally factual. We're talking about a real estate transaction. We're talking about a physical thing that has certain characteristics, and then the financial stuff that goes along with it. Unless you're going to lie about something, the answer is always going to be the same, or it always should be the same.
Now, there's situations, especially like through negotiations, where you'll hit something that you've never hit before. I might call Ivette and say, here's the scenario. What do you think? And it'll be a scenario neither of us have ever been through. And then we brainstorm like how to counter or what's the next move. So that has nothing to do with the truth. That's like through negotiation, we're collaborating with each other to come up with the best possible solution. And we'll talk through plausible scenarios, like if we reply this way, what could happen if we reply that way? And sometimes we present it to the client in just that way. Like if I'm negotiating a deal, I'll say, Ivette and I consulted each other on this, and here's what we determined are our options, and here's the risk and reward of each option, right? So we lay it out to them, and they go, well, what do you think? And say, well, I'm leaning toward, solution A, but I just wanted you to know the risk, and it depends on what your threshold is for it. If you want to go more conservative, you might have to pay a little bit more, but you'll have less likely lose the house. So, but we think we can get away with A. And we let them make the decision. And if they go, well, you're the professional, you tell me, and I say, well, we like A little bit better, right? And that's a good collaboration with a client.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll get that question of, if it was you, like if you were buying this house, what would you do? Or if you were selling this house, or you were going to do this, what would you do? And that's the beauty of being a professional and understanding it, is that there is kind of no difference, there really isn't a difference in what I would do for myself if I was buying the house and what I would want my client to get the same kind of benefit, or what I would advise them to do. Now, their situation may be a little bit different, and you may have to take some other variables into account for them as to for yourself. But like, that's a question that I love, because it's like, yeah, okay, because what I'm telling you is what I would be doing myself, right? Like if you can't honestly say that if you were in the same scenario or you were doing that for the client and it was for yourself, that you wouldn't do that, you shouldn't be doing the deal.
One of the big what would you do questions that hits is about what should we pay? How high should we go? Right. So here's what I tell people. I said, look, I'm the type of person that the house to me is the most important purchase. When I built my home with the builder, I wanted an extra staircase. He said 10 grand. I go, I don't want siding. I want all brick. That's 10 grand. I ran out of money. Right. And I didn't negotiate these things. I didn't go, well, I'll do the extra brick, but do it for 8,000 for me, because I never bought a house, like built a house. Yeah. So, but I was rationalizing in my head, this could be my forever home.
Right.
I'll pay up for it. If I'm going to pay up for anything, it's not going to be a car. It's not going to be a watch. It's going to be my house.
Right.
It's the most important purchase I'll ever make. So when the client's asking me, what do I think? I go, that's the kind of person I am, okay? But some of my clients, they're very concerned about value when they buy a house, and they're very concerned about how much it'll appreciate, and the dollars up front are very important, okay?
Yeah.
And if they pay up for a house, they may regret it down the road because they don't have the same calculation program that I do.
Right.
So you have to determine what kind of client you are. If it's more about the value of the dollar value and all of that, market stuff, then I support that. We'll
right.
try to drive the price down. And if you don't get the house, you don't get the house. But if that's the way you want to roll, I'm game. So I give them my perspective, but I let them decide which route they want to take. I never want to tell them what to do.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, the decision is up to theirs. What I'm always trying to give them is enough all the information, not just enough information, but all the information that they would need to make a well-educated decision. Right. And once you give them all that information, and if they ask you for the guidance of like, well, what do you think is the best decision? And to your point, well, if your goal is this may be the best decision. If your goal is this may be the best decision. So, there's always these variables that go along with it. I mean, when we talk about negotiation and we talk about those things, it kind of, everybody thinks negotiation is, I'm in my camp, you're in your camp, and I have to get as much for me and, to take enough from you. And it becomes a very confrontational thing. I mean, we could spend all day talking about negotiation.
Yeah, but we'll hit it pretty good though.
The thing about negotiation is that it doesn't always have to be, and it shouldn't be really in my mind, it shouldn't be this confrontational thing. The seller's trying to get X for their house. And for the seller, maybe the dollar amount isn't the variable that's the most important. Maybe they need extra time to get out. Maybe they've been in the house for 35 years, right? And they need, they're having a hard time. They're older. It's taking them a while to get that stuff. Maybe they need 60 days more, And so you can come in and work those kind of angles that are important for the deal. It's not always, the highest dollar amount or the lowest dollar amount. There's so many other things that you can bring into the deal that make it so that it works well for everybody involved.
And you bring up a good point too. I went to negotiation school. I'm a certified negotiation expert with the board. I studied under Wayne Paprocki, who was a legend in the real estate.
That means Frank has a lot of letters behind his name.
Yeah,
on his business card.
Yeah, the letters. I don't even put the letters on. Oh yeah, actually I do. I'm proud of the letters.
You worked hard for them. You should put them on there.
What I learned from the class was that there's basically three types of negotiators. There's the competitor, the compliant, and the collaborator. And the competitor wants to win at all costs, and they will use whatever means they can, intimidation, they'll use profanity, and sometimes you need to shut them down. And I remember doing a deal with a top producer. She had done way more business than I did, and I submitted the offer, and she called me up on the phone. She goes, "Thanks for the shit offer." And I'm like, well, we got a competitor here. I just told her, because she started like yelling at me through one of the conversations, and I'm thinking to myself, no. I go, I'm going to hang up the phone right now. Nobody talks to me that way. And when you're ready to have a rational conversation, then call me back. And she's like, and I hung up on her. So I shut her down.
Yeah.
And she knew like I wasn't going to put up with the crap. And then everything toned down from there. So sometimes you have to do stuff like that.
Sometimes you got to push the bully back.
Yep.
Right. And an agent like that, sometimes they need to be pushed back. I've had the similar kind of situations. Big player out of the city coming out to the suburbs, thinks they're going to run the negotiation. And, you just kind of go, that's not how it's going to work. You know what I mean? We can work like professionals, or, there's other buyers out there, and you're doing your buyer a disservice, or you're doing your seller a disservice by bringing all that kind of emotion stuff into it. That's our job, is to take the emotion out of it. You know what I mean? To try to calm that emotion down, because,
right.
And to try to make it a rational decision so that everybody can weigh all the options and make a rational decision as to what's best for them, their life, their income, their family, all of those things. Right. And people get, it's human nature. People get wound.
Yeah.
And what I like about this, what the story that you told was like, listen, I'm not going to be spoken to like that. So why don't you reevaluate your approach here and then give me a call back. Right. I mean, that's really what you told her. You gave her the opportunity to reset. You kind of forgave her for coming at you like that. You gave her an opportunity to reset. She reset and she came back, and you guys did the deal go through?
Yeah, we did the deal.
Yeah, so you did the deal. At the end of the day, you gave her the bully pushback, and then she understood that that's not going to work with you. So let's go with the rational part.
Yeah. And at the end, she even said, it was a pleasure working with you. I think she probably won so many times being that way.
Right.
And then when, I gave her a little sting.
Yep.
And,
people go with what works.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? And if you see a lot of success by being the bully in the negotiation, and I'm not trying to boil it down to like, there's either a bully or not a bully or anything like that, but people go with what works. It's kind of like the scripts and dialogues.
Mm.
You're trying to overcome objections and things like that when you're having these conversations that everybody in sales talks about, objection handling, all of those kinds of things. And you actually use one and it works. And you're kind of like, wow, when you really start to learn how to negotiate with people and you have those you gain that knowledge, it's helpful all around, not just for the consumer, not just for your client, but for the professionalism of the industry, that like, look, there's different ways that we can handle this. We can do this, and I really think that the negotiation boils down to be collaborative. When you talk about the different kind of negotiators, that the most successful, I think, the negotiators at the end of the day are the ones that work together, right? And the ones that collaborate. What is your buyer really looking for? What's most important for your buyer? If I'm representing a seller and you come in with an offer, I want to know a little bit about your buyers. It doesn't mean I want to know their demographic information or any of those kinds of things, but what are they looking for in this deal? What are they looking for with the house? Do they need to move fast? Can they hold off a little bit? All of those variables that go into it. And then we can work together to see what my people can assist your people with and what your people can assist my people with. It doesn't always, we all know it doesn't always work that way. But I think that ideal or that goal as part of a negotiation is where you should start.
Yeah. And actually, the three kinds of negotiator, we talked about the competitor, then there's the compliant negotiator. And that's just basically a person that's so nice, they'll make a stand in either direction.
Yeah. The wet noodle.
The collaborator, at the end of the transaction, everybody feels as good as they can on both sides. You've facilitated it through your words, through your communications. Hey, I know you're coming down a little bit more in price than you wanted to, but look what you're getting here. We did this, we gave you that. And then like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I think you and I have a distinct edge over like anybody who becomes a realtor. We have a distinct edge in negotiations simply because we're on the trading floor. We're negotiating under high pressure, having to make decisions in nanoseconds that if we screw that up, we could lose our own house, right?
Yeah.
So, and you learn how to read people, the gestures of people, who's holding what. It's like almost a big card game, and you learn how to have that steely grace under fire that we had going into being a realtor.
The thing about negotiating deals is the pace of the deal, right? Sometimes you get people, buyers and agents who are, you can see them in the starting gate, like they're shaking, they're trying to get out. They want this deal to move quick. And sometimes slowing the deal down, the pace is important. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if the deal isn't moving fast enough, like any negotiation I shouldn't say any, but any negotiation that lasts a few days, and starts to stretch out, those deals always become a problem. In my experience, they always become a problem. If the negotiation takes too long, there's too much going on, it's too slow, people aren't reacting, there's not enough urgency. But, on the flip side of that, you have to slow the urgency a lot of times.
Right.
And negotiation has to have a pace, right? So if I get somebody, side thing, if I get an agent that's, an urgent agent calling me, trying to, push the negotiation, I'll let them go to voicemail all the time. I'll call them back because they'll calm down, right? They don't even realize that, I'm not trying to mess with them or anything like that. But if they're making a call, if they're calling and calling, they're getting worked and they're getting that emotion in it. And sometimes if you give them a little bit of time, they'll work that emotion out and then we can have a conversation. So it's and that goes back to what we started talking about,
right?
Is the professionalism, the knowledge. How do you gain all that knowledge? One of the best kind of exercises that I did was that one of the brokerages that I was with in the past, we hired Second City people, improv people. And the improv people came up with scenarios, different scenarios. And then you sat down as an agent and was trying to figure out what was going on in that. What was the motivation of the buyer? What was the motivation of the seller? Where do they have to go? And we would sit down and do negotiations. And like the improv people would be the other side of the negotiation, being stubborn about something. You're really trying to figure out, well, what is their real motivation? And in this industry, not enough of that happens. We don't do those kinds of things enough, right? And I was very lucky to have that opportunity to do those kinds of things. And that's just every opportunity that you can get in any profession, but this profession particularly, because a lot of agents get unleashed onto the public just because they passed the state licensing exam. As you know, you can get your driver's license. You're 16 years old. You take a few classes. You got a driver's license. Does not mean you're a good driver. Right? I mean, you get better at driving.
But you could be. You could be 16 and be a good driver. We don't want to demonize new real estate agents, but
that's true. But there does need to be a lot of education.
I agree.
Right? So I would say that, like, from that example, if they went to a really good driving school and they got a lot of those things to learn on the road, those kinds of things would make them a good driver. That doesn't necessarily mean that somebody who's 16, whose parents, were like, hey, you go around the block and then go take your test and, now you're a driver. They get unleashed and they're not a good driver. There are, unfortunately in every, I know we need to be careful about what we say about other agents and things, but in every industry, there are people who are not as good as they should be. It's just a fact of the matter. Doctors, dentists, mechanics.
Yeah, this is just a sidebar. I learned this in real estate. I was negotiating a deal with an agent, and she completely botched everything up, and the deal went to somebody else at a lower price and worse terms. And I was being firm with her on the phone, and she goes, "I've been doing this for 45 years." And I thought to myself, if that's your claim to fame of your expertise is how long you've been doing something, I'm like, I've played golf for 45 years and I still suck at it. So you know what I'm saying?
I still break a club around.
So I want to go back to some of the things we talked about, which are really interesting about the pace of a negotiation. Sometimes I call it a dramatic pause. You purposely, you hold off. You don't answer the phone, right? And you put them on pause because you can create urgency that way too. And then sometimes when I want to increase the pace and somebody's dragging their feet, and this happens specifically with when I'm negotiating on a buyer's behalf, and all of a sudden the pace of negotiations with the seller slows, I know that there probably is some other interest on the house and they're trying to put me on hold, right?
Circling. Yeah.
So what I like to do there, and words obviously are the most powerful thing in a negotiation, and how we use our words and how we put our words together, even just a formation of a single sentence in an email can change everything. So like when I'm trying to speed up the pace, I might say, I will deduce that your sellers are losing interest, and we're going to look at 5 houses today, right? Yeah. And then like, okay, here you go. Suck on that for a while, right? And then like, wait a minute, like
then you get the call and you let them go to voicemail. Then you let them go to voicemail and stew in there for a little while.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a service called Slide Dial.
Oh, my favorite.
And it
my absolute
you call
favorite.
Slide Dial and it says, what's the cell number? And then it goes right to their voicemail. Their phone won't even ring, you know?
I used to love.
Yeah, I still use the Slide Dial once in a while.
I love the Slide Dial trick.
This is for all the agents watching and the people in the buying public. The first thing that Ivette and I do when we start a negotiation, before we even start the negotiation, we check out the production of the agent. How long have they been in business? How many deals have they done? And we can get that data off the multiple listing service, because that gives us a little insight into the experience of the person. I've had agents that have told me up front how long they've been in business when they started a negotiation. And when I checked their production, they haven't sold a house in 3 years. We do that so we understand what we're dealing with. And then in
the MLS here, if I can interrupt, the MLS here, MRED, is good because they give team credit. It could be somebody who transactions aren't necessarily in their name.
This is true.
You can see that they're part of a team, and so a lot of those transactions may actually be
and
theirs.
that actually has happened to me. And when I call the agent out, she's like, "I'm on my 77th home, but I'm under a team, so you won't see it closed under my name." And I'm like, "Okay, good. I'm just checking."
Yeah, and I love the guys who put out the stats. And I sold 4,000 homes last year, and they sold 4, and their team sold them all. But they all go under my name.
There was a survey somewhere along the line, and this is more at the beginning of our career, and I think they told us this at Properties, but the survey, it was a survey done to home buyers and home sellers, and the question was something like, of all the things you think are important in a good professional realtor that may be lacking, negotiations was number one.
It's that kind of old saying, and you and I have joked about it, that it's not a good deal unless everybody's unhappy, including the realtors. Then you got a good deal because everybody had to participate, right? Everybody had to put their skin in the game in order to get the deal done. And, as unfortunate as it is, that sometimes that causes a little bit of hostility. People feel like sometimes they didn't get the best representation, or they didn't get that. And some of that's our fault. We have to own, I always tell agents, look, set the expectation early and over communicate with your client. Like if you have a listing, I know we're talking about buyers, but if you have a listing and there's no activity on that listing for 5-6 days, you better call your client and tell them, I've got nothing to tell you, but if there is, I'm going to call you with it, right? Like we're doing our job.
Right.
It's out there. It's had so many views on each portal. It's got all these things, all of those things. It's just like, it's a holiday weekend. And so we're not the only one that hasn't had showing. Your listing isn't the only one. The showings are down across my listings. So I don't want you to be nervous about that. You have to communicate with your client. And I think the main thing that comes between realtors and their clients is a lack of really good communication. Like I want to communicate to the point where I'm not a stalker, but that they think I'm over communicating. Like I got enough information. Good. Thanks. Because if you're working for somebody and, let's be honest, or let's be straightforward about it, that, we charge a lot because we're good at what we do. And if they're going to pay us a lot of money, they should be getting information. And the flip side of that is if I'm paying somebody a lot of money and I don't get communicated with, I want to know what they're doing with my money, right? At the end of the day. And that's not an illegitimate concern for a consumer. And so we just have to address that, and that comes down to, everything with negotiation, everything in this business is set the expectation and then over communicate, and always be willing to change change that, but always over communicate. You have to do that. And that works in everything.
Yeah. And I'd rather over communicate and have them say, hey, you don't have to call me up every 5 days than, I never heard from you. I didn't know what was going on. Another thing that I try to pick up on the agent when I'm negotiating with, after I've checked their production, is what is their motivation? Because we have, and like in every business, we have agents that are motivated by excellence, and we have agents that are motivated by money.
A car payment.
Yeah.
I got to sell this house. I got a car payment.
I know we're all in different situations, but my motivation and Ivette's is always excellence. And we lose a deal or whatever, it's on to the next one. And losing deals does suck. It's not fun, but you can tell sometimes the agents that, they're in dire need of a paycheck, and it's kind of a conflict of interest.
Yes.
Right? You're supposed to be negotiating on behalf of your client, which means you're taking some risk that they may not get the house, but you're doing the best for them. And then I got to make a car payment, and they're like, so my buddy Andy, he's one of my best friends, he would have used me, but he bought in Indiana. And he's like, so this lady was recommended to us, and we went and looked at this house. It was on the market for like 175 days, and we liked the house. So I said to her, and Andy came from the trading floor, so he's a negotiator too. He's like, well, where do you think we can come in at a reasonable offer? Oh, well, I think the property's is underpriced. I think we should pay asking price. And he's like, it's been on the market for like 6 months, right? So you got to wonder what the motivation of the agent is, or maybe she just didn't know any better. I mean, who knows? Yeah. So he wound up taking over the negotiation. Well, here's what we're going to go in at. And then he manifested all the counters and stuff. And he got a better price on the house than the asking price.
Inside the industry, we love to kind of be like, we're dealing with an agent who doesn't know what they're doing, or, this agent is, a real pain. But sometimes, it's not the agent's fault. They got into the business, they got hooked up with a brokerage or whatever it is, and they just haven't been taught, right? And that's one of my overarching issues, and why I got into, being a part of the association and in association leadership and professional standards and the education committees and all of those kinds of things, because sometimes you get into, people, like I said, people get into the business and they start and they don't get the opportunities to learn. And I think that it's not necessarily their fault that they end up not as skilled as they should be, in my opinion, right? A skill level as competence is a core issue for me. So, but it's not necessarily that agent's fault,
right?
That they don't have the competence, because the system of getting a license from the state. So the system of getting a license from the state is very different than being a realtor. Being a realtor is different than just being a real estate agent, right? And so being a realtor, you subscribe to a code of ethics, you subscribe to a higher professional standard, those kinds of things, right? I could go on and give you a whole lecture about all that, but it's a higher level of professionalism, and you should subscribe to that, and you should want that designation. Being called a realtor is not the same as being a real estate agent. So that's something, and the competence that comes along with that, and the constant education is really important. So, as much as we, inside the industry sometimes, go after agents for not knowing what they're doing or not having this, and sometimes it's not their fault. Now, certainly in any industry and anybody you come across on the planet, there's some knuckleheads out there. For a lot of them, it's not their fault that they haven't got.
I agree.
They haven't had the opportunity.
And what I love to do, and I have a lot of realtor friends now that I've coached that have been on the other side of the transaction. I've had agents go, this may be detrimental to them, but I try not to make it so. This is my first deal. I'm like, okay, well, here's what's going to happen. And I'm going to go back to my people, and we're going to come back with what we feel is a good price. And then, I'm like coaching them in the transaction, right? To help them. And I go, and after the transaction's done, especially if they've been respectful and thankful, I'm like, look, you can call me up anytime when you come across something in your career that you need help with. And they do. They call me. They go, all right, I'm in a negotiation. Here's how it's progressed to now. Like, what do you think? And I'm like, well, did you check the production of the agent? Is this experienced agent? Whatever. I coach them through. What are you doing for marketing to build your business? I love to work with new agents because they don't teach us anything in real estate school on how to build our business and what to do with our business. It's a bunch of stuff that we most of which we never revisit again.
The property line, adverse possession. Somebody puts their shed across the property line. Nobody, nobody disputes it. Now they own that. The school stuff teaches you how to transfer one piece of property to another through the state's paperwork system. But the actual finding the right home for somebody that's going to fulfill their needs is not taught as part of real estate school. That's taught, unfortunately, maybe, but fortunately, maybe, in the field. If you have a mentor, I've always pushed really hard for like mentorship in this business. If you want to be a bricklayer, right? It's like a 2-year apprenticeship. You don't, and you're carrying the bricks for everybody else. You're mixing the mortar. You're doing you're doing all of that stuff. And then maybe they teach you a little bit about how to snap off the end of the brick and put it in the corner and all the little nuanced stuff to speed the process and make it strong, and you don't get that in real estate school, I guess is a way to put it. You don't get that from licensing. And you don't necessarily get it, and the realtors might get mad at me, but you don't necessarily get it from just being a realtor either. Being a realtor means pouring into the system and taking courses that make you better at what you do, right? Because you can get the designation and kind of plateau there, whereas there's all kinds of things that you can continually learn.
We've talked a little bit about a good realtor knows the components of a house and has a good trained eye. A good realtor has some savvy in negotiations. And now we'll talk about the other important factor is the partnerships realtors make with the vendors that they use, like their real estate attorney, their lenders, and their home inspectors.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. From a team of people, the vendors that you have from in the state of Illinois, it's an attorney state. Northern Illinois, it's an attorney state. Attorneys help you do the closing. From everything from the attorney you use to maybe a plumber, right? Those resources that we get to know, right? We get to know those people. I mean, like you're in and out of a lot of houses. You're dealing with people and they want to know that you're the resource. Plus, as building a real estate business, who better to ask for a plumber? You know what I mean? I want to get a deck built. Who do you know, right? They should come to us because if you're a professional in the industry, you should know who builds a good deck, who is a good plumber, those kinds of things. Now, I think because of the era of, litigation and all of the things that go on, and you want to be able to give somebody options that as vendors, I always try to give people 2 or 3 options of the people that I would use, right? And generally speaking, plumbers, there's a million plumbers out, there's a million electricians, there's a million realtors for that matter, but who's good and who's reliable? And so when I have conversations, when we built a vendor team and the people that we wanted to deal with, and you got to be careful even calling them a vendor team, like they're not on my team, but the people that I would recommend, in my referral pool, I guess is a way to put it. I always told them, I have a 0 tolerance, right, for client complaints. Now, there's always a client, and if consumers are listening to this, if potential clients are listening to this, sometimes you guys can be difficult, right? So I would know if a client was the difficult kind of client that's hard to make happy, right? But I would always explain to the vendors that were potential on my list that we have a 0 tolerance for that. So if I get a complaint from a client that you said you're going to be there at 2 and you no-showed, or you were going to, you were 45 minutes late and you didn't call to tell you were being 45 minutes late, or you didn't clean up after your job, right? Somebody comes in and puts a new toilet in and leaves, dirty marks on the bathroom floor and stuff like that. You're done. It's 0 tolerance for,
which is the standard we hold ourselves to.
Absolutely. You either do the job and you do it correctly and the client is happy, right? Or you're not going to be on the list. It's that simple. I'm not in the business of, trying to get any kind of a referral from any of the people that I work with or any of the people that I refer business to, plumbers, electricians, contractors, any of that kind of stuff. They make their money the way they make their money. I make the money the way that I make money. The only thing that I ask for them is the 0 tolerance rule. Like, that's it. Like, you satisfy the client or we'll find somebody who will, and that sounds a little harsh, but it's just a reality. I mean, you set the expectation, like we talked about earlier. You set the expectation. You have to set that expectation that we expect excellence from the people that we recommend, because we want to be that source. If I recommend somebody and they screw the job up for whatever reason, or they don't do a good enough job, that person's not going to come back to me. It's all of our businesses,
Exactly right. And to that end, I'm a loyal guy. You do a great job for me. I'm going to you first, but it's still 0 tolerance, no matter what.
Right.
We had a photographer, Ivette and I, we loved him. He's a photographer and a coach. Because he knew social media and stuff, and he helped us a lot. We loved him to death. And we just had one photo shoot where he went MIA. We were calling him, texting him. It was 7 days without a reply.
Oof.
And on like day 4, I said, I'm done with him. You have a longer relationship with him and you want to stick with him, that's fine. I'm done with him. We have a client waiting to list their home that we can't list. We told him, 1 to 2 days, we'll have the photographs and we'll be ready to go. I can't have this. It's one and done. So we lost the photographer. I had a stager who was awesome. She had a clause in her contract that said, if you don't need the furniture for 6 months, I'll prorate to give you some money back. Well, I got the house sold, in the first week.
Ouch.
It was staged. So the client called her up and said, your thing says $600.
I get 5 months and 3 weeks back.
Yeah, $600 back on what we paid you. It was like $3,600. They were going to get $600 back. And then I get a call from the stager, and she said, yeah, well, your clients called me and said, they wanted a rebate. And I go, yeah, so what? Well, give them the rebate. She's like, oh, but in the contract it says I need a 90-day notice. And I said, a whole transaction listing to close doesn't even take 90 days. Yeah, like in this case, it isn't going to, we couldn't possibly give you a 90-day notice. You're getting your furniture back. It's value to you. Give them the $600.
Yeah, you can put it in another spot.
And she goes, oh, I absolutely will not. And I go, okay, well, it's your business. I'm not going to tell you how to run your business. I wouldn't do that. Okay.
Yeah. Warning.
So I gave her the warning, and then the client called her, and I told the client, if she doesn't give you the 600, I will.
I will. Yeah.
And I gave her, they took the 600.
Yep.
And we have to do that.
So that's stand-up business, right? That's business 101. It just is. I mean, there's no further, I couldn't add anything to that explanation to make it, to put another bow on it or anything. That is exactly business.
So
101.
she already, from that time till today, probably lost 4 deals from me, which she would have made plenty of money on. She got a terrible write-up by the client. I mean, she was livid, and I did help my review. I had an attorney show up. He was my number 1 attorney. I don't know. He was having a bad day. He was yelling at our clients at the table, and they're looking at me like. So when the deal was done, I said, I don't know what the deal is with him. I've never seen that side of him. And I wrote them a check for the attorney fees as well.
Right. Yeah.
Now they're lifetime clients.
Yeah.
I never saw that attorney again. No desire. So to your point, I hate to say it, it's the one and done. It has to be that way.
I think some of that comes from being on the trading floor, right? From being in the financial markets for so long. You make a mistake, you own it, and you get your checkbook out, and you step up to the plate, and you write the check, and you make it right. If a check can make it right. And you do that, and that's part of business. Sometimes mistakes get made. Even we can make a mistake, right? Like, if somebody's late or something like that and they miss it, or those we can have that conversation. Mistakes sometimes. Everybody's fallible. Everybody's human, right? And at the end of the day, real estate isn't brain surgery, right? I mean, it's not. It's not somebody coming into the emergency room that's been in a massive car wreck and you have to do everything. So things happen, and we can always work that out. But it's business 101. And at the end of the day, it's about the consumer, right? It really is about the consumer. There's a lot of things out there about how real estate agents get paid and how this kind of stuff goes, and all of the things that are in real estate. And there are some things that are valid criticisms of the industry, but overall, a professional that really knows what they're doing is going to take care of their clients and going to make sure that their client isn't damaged in the deal. And that's our job. I mean, that really is our job, to guide them to the best decision that they can make, and to make sure that it's not a decision that's going to hurt them in the long run.
Absolutely. And then I had another interesting story with one of my preferred lenders. We had a buyer client, did tons of deals for us. And, I'm sure you're the same way as me. When you have a preferred lender, you want to pass the client off to them, and you don't want to hear anything except, hey, clear to close, right?
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah.
Same thing with the attorney. I don't want to be babysitting the lender. I don't want to be babysitting the attorney, right?
Exactly.
So this is one of my premier lenders, and he said to me, I can't get him approved. they're not good to go. I said, okay. So I flipped them off to another lender. And this one lender wasn't even like my secondary lender. This lender was just one of my clients used him and he pulled off a miracle, I thought.
Yeah.
So I called him up and I said, I got some people here, take a look and see what you can do. My other guy couldn't get him done. So he calls me back and he says, oh yeah, I can get him done. I just asked him about his bonus and we're going to, he asked for an advance on his bonus and they're going to give it to him. It's like, beautiful. Thank you. Now I get a call from the first guy who's a friend of mine, the lender, because the clients told him
another guy got it done.
Yeah. And he goes, well, I could have got an advance on the bonus and I could have got the loan done. I go, dude, that's not my job. That's your job to ask the questions, right? And I still use him as my lender and I love him to death. It's not my problem. I'm not a lender. I'm a realtor.
But see, that's the thing is that like you're willing to have the conversation and that lender learned. They learned to ask a few more questions. And that's kind of the overall professionalism. We have to be willing to help each other to raise the profession up, right? And if you can have that discussion with the lender and he can learn from that, then great. We'll give him more. We'll try to get him more business. We'll try to help him out. And, as long as he's willing to look, like I said just a minute ago, people make mistakes. I make mistakes. I screw things up. Sometimes things happen. I accidentally tore up a earnest money check one time. One time I was putting all my mail away and I was like, oh, this is garbage, this is garbage, this is garbage. I had an earnest money check sitting there. Sure enough, I tore it in half. And I was like, oh, so I had to call a client up and be like, yeah, I tore your check in half like an idiot. So, those things happen. But, if we're willing to learn from them and willing to, grow the business and grow the professionalism, that's at the end of the day, the bottom line. And to your point about, having a team of people, all of those kinds of things, we as realtors, and as the agent in the area and as the expert in the area, should have all those resources, and one of the things that makes an agent a realtor or whatever interchangeable term we're going to use for a real estate agent is, you kind of have to know everybody else's job, right? You kind of have to know what the lender needs to know, what they have to do. You don't kind of, you do. You have to know what's going to qualify the loan. You have to know kind of what's going to go on with the attorney. What is the attorney bringing to the table? So you have to be able, in my mind, I have to know the attorney's job. I have to know the inspector's job. I have to know the lender's job, and I have to know the appraiser's job, right? And I have to be able to, of course, with my giant ego, I would like to believe that I could do all of those jobs in my sleep, right? But I have to know enough about their job to know that, like, are they doing their job correctly? If I send 2 or 3 buyers to a lender and he can't get anybody done, right? He can't get them the money, then what's going on, right? So we have to know their jobs just as well as we know our own profession.
We'll expand on a little bit more of the buyer stuff because I think we pushed past, but back to that lender story when he said, well, I could have got it done. He got a little flippant with me on the phone and I was calm. I said, sir, if you don't trust me after all we've been through, then we don't have a relationship. And if you don't trust me, I'm not going to get on a podium and tell you that I'm trustworthy because people who do that, they're not trustworthy.
Right.
So you figure out where we've gone, where we've been. And, if you don't think I'm trustworthy, I got a whole bunch of lenders lined up. All right. So you think about it, calm down, and then call me. And then the next day, I'm so sorry, whatever. He was having some personal problems. And hey, I'm with you, but don't give me crap. You had the opportunity. You had the first opportunity, and he didn't think of the right question. Which, moving forward, he actually incorporated that every time.
Financial mistakes tend to make you learn quickly.
Knowing about everybody's job, we'll go back to kind of inspection/construction. When a buyer has a home inspection, and there's a lot of items on the home inspection, they're relying on us to tell them like, how big of a deal is this, right?
Yeah.
And how many times have we gone through the home inspection before we even have the conversation with the buyer, right? Because we get a copy of the home inspection and I'm going, Okay, water heater is 18 years old, which I knew because I looked at it when we looked at the house.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, that's $1,000 installed.
A grand installed. You're still in 1996. Those things are $2,200 now.
Okay, Mr. North Shore, you pay up over there. I got Billy Bob who can do it for me here.
Yeah. So for anybody listening to this podcast, call Frank for your water heater.
And then,
my guy costs a lot.
3 windows are shot at mid-grade windows. That's $1,500, and I'm going down and itemizing. And then when I have the conversation with the client, they're like, I go, okay, these are the things that I think are worthy of taking note of. The little stuff, the loose toilet, and all this other stuff. This is normal. You guys can fix that. I'll come over and I'll help you fix it. But then when I start, here's this, here's that, here's that, and I go, we're at $13,000 in things that you're going to have to address sooner than later. And then, just having the ability to know what things cost is in that category of you saying, you got to know a little bit about inspection. You got to know a little bit about construction. You got to know a little bit, because they're still relying on us. We are the air traffic controller.
Yeah.
And the worst thing that attorneys do is they won't engage the agent on the inspection, and they'll go, we're going to ask for everything. We're going to ask for $55,000 in credits. And they spin us out of the negotiation. And there's attorneys that do that.
Yes.
That not our attorneys, but like when we have a listing, the buyer's attorney will do that, and you'll get this horrific inspection repair credit request. And then you call up the realtor and say, you could have at least called me and give me a heads up this was coming. And they're like, they didn't even include me.
Yeah, they didn't know.
And I
tell sellers in attorney states, I tell sellers that you're going to get an attorney letter on the inspection. And what the attorney letter is going to say is, as much as we would love to buy your house, here's what makes it a piece of shit. You know what I mean? And it's going to feel that way when you read the letter, because it's going to come in attorney, it's going to have attorney heading on it. And it's going to have all the things that people that are CC'd on it, all the attorney lingo in it. And it's going to make, and you're going to get offended. But I'll tell you this, when I'm on the buy side, I always tell my clients, don't say no for the seller. Like, if it's important to you, we can ask for it. I can tell you that, they may say no, but let's not say no for them, right? We all know that inspection stuff is supposed to be health and safety, right? You can't go in and say, I don't like the color of the toilet, or I don't like the color of the walls.
Or scratch on the hardwood floor.
Scratch on the hardwood floor. That's what you're supposed to be looking at when you're there. Now, you can certainly ask for the floors to be refinished, right? Don't say no for the seller. You can certainly ask for that, and conversely, I'll tell a listing agent that I got a buyer that's, we're going to have a laundry list. Just work your way through it and tell us what's okay and what's not. You know what I mean? Don't get offended by the laundry list, right? They just, they're nervous buyers, or they're very concerned about this, and they want to know if those kinds of things. So if there's anything that you seller is okay with doing, let's get it done. Right. Those kinds of conversations, it goes back to the negotiation thing, because the negotiation doesn't stop at the price and when we close. The negotiations, the whole, and that's what the consumer needs to understand. If we can push any message, I guess, out of this podcast, it would be that the consumer on the buy side really should have a professional helping them. I know we've said that over and over again. And that's why, because every step of the process is a negotiation. The inspection requests. And here in Illinois, specifically on the northern Illinois, where you have these attorneys, and the attorneys send letters back and forth. Well, in Arizona, and I've licensed in a lot of states, but in Arizona, they have a thing called a BINSR. It's the buyer, that's the short acronym, but it's the buyer inspection request. So everything is in writing. And what I like to do when I sold real estate here was to work it out between the agents and try to keep the attorney kind of out of it, not keep him out of it, but, minimize his involvement because of the hostility that those kind of letters promote or inspire in people, right? And so try to have the agents negotiate everything, get everything bullet pointed down, send it over to the attorney, and make sure that the attorney, it passes whatever the attorney wants to look at, make sure it's legalized up, and then the attorneys can go back and forth with what we've already in the negotiation. Now, in a title state, a lot of states like Florida, Arizona, and stuff like that, there are no attorneys. So it is just the agents back and forth. And what's really important about those things is have really good forms, right? So I'm asking for this, I'm asking for that, I'm asking for this. And it also explains to the consumer in a very concise way that really it's only health and safety stuff. So it's really like lack of smoke detectors, fire things, if something's dangerous.
GFCI outlets, all that stuff.
outlets and stuff like that. In Arizona, they have these things that you got to put on the end of the hose bib that's a pressure regulator because, they're moving so much water. And like you're used to being in Chicago where it's kind of lakefront water and everything's kind of even pressure. Water pressures are different based in different neighborhoods. And so you got to have, it's an anti-siphon thing so that the water doesn't go back into the, any kind of, and they separate, a little too much about Arizona, but they separate irrigation water from potable water and stuff like that. So you want to make sure that those don't get mixed. And so there's certain fittings that need to go on the end of the stuff. And that's like the GFCI outlet of Arizona. Right. You know what I mean? So it's those things that like, it's definitely there, but it's not a big deal. It's like $8 for one of those things. Like, I'll throw half a dozen in, if that's going to make the difference in the deal. Right. Those kinds of things.
It's kind of on the subject of inspections. I just wanted to share this story. I had some clients that I love to death, and, They bought a condo in the city and they used an inspector, and then they sold their condo and bought a house in Hinsdale, and they brought the same inspector and they loved him. Okay. So this guy comes, older gentleman in his 70s, and he's all loaded up with tool belts and everything. And he's telling me about what an expert he is.
Oh,
and I said,
here we go.
I go, okay, just so you know, I went to home inspection school, so you can have the real conversation with me. I'll know what you're talking about. He goes, who taught you? And I said, Chuck Belfontaine. He goes, I trained him. Like he was like pushing it in my face. I'm like, okay, good. So I'm in the kitchen at the counter and I'm doing my work and stuff. And the people were there with their little kids during the inspection, and they were following him around. And about every 15 minutes, the wife of the couple, she'd be in tears. And she says, he said that the basement will never be able to properly be heated. I go, there's always a way to fix stuff. Anything's fixable. So she did it like 10 times. And then the inspection report came out, and it was like you were saying, it was a 144 pager.
Yeah.
And the verbiage that he put in the thing said, the basement will never be able to properly be heated. He put that in his inspection report. Yeah, that is not the job of an inspector. No. The inspector is supposed to tell you, here's my findings. My findings are there's an uneven distribution of heat because of the heat source. This needs to be looked at by a heating and air specialist. Yeah. You don't make these conclusions. And at the end of his report, he said, he put this in the summary. I have inspected over 500 vintage homes, and I have never seen one in worse shape than this house. And I estimate the total repair cost at over $250,000. He put that. I used that inspection report as a teaching tool. I used to bring that to listing presentations and show people we could be on the receiving end of an inspection like this. And, it's going to be up to me to decipher the nonsense part of this so I can help the buyer's agent, not get terrified if this is their inspector.
The thing about that is that, that's so overstepping of the bounds. We're not trying to throw anybody under the bus here, but that's so overstepping of the bounds that not only, that damages everybody in the deal, right? It damages the seller. Is the seller actually going to be able to sell the house? Do they have to do $250,000 worth of repairs before anybody comes in the door that's going to think about that kind of stuff? And a buyer may, I've seen things that I wouldn't have bought myself for myself, but the buyer wasn't scared of it. They had the ammunition, the financial ammunition to take care of the problem. They were okay taking care of the problem. We brought in contractors to look at that, to heat this thing. Maybe to heat that thing he thought it was outside of the scope because it was outside of what he thought would be reasonable to pay or the amount of work to do that. But a buyer may be like, I really want to use that basement, and I'm all right with putting $25,000 in there to try to heat the thing, So you're taking away, you're overstepping your bounds, you're taking all that stuff away, and you're ruining an opportunity, or making the deal more challenging for everybody involved by kind of like overstepping and trying to also be the awesome expert, right? Competence and expertise is something that is super important to the two of us and super important in this industry to really push, but that doesn't always mean that you also know everything. Right.
Right.
I mean, even to this day, I will call people. You and I talk. I talk to Heidi. I would have no problem picking up the phone, calling Ivette, and saying, "What do you think about this?"
Right.
And people that I've done business, what do you think about this? What have you ever run across this before? Right. At the highest levels of the medical profession, right? At the Mayo Clinic, right? One of the big things that Mayo does, if I anybody who knows about Mayo Clinic, if I'm getting it wrong, be sure to let us know. But I think that they get like 5 doctors all together and they all conference. Like, how would you do this? What would you do that? Like just because you got, you need spinal surgery because you got a, super bulging disc or something like that. And Mayo's going to take your case. They're going to all talk about it and try to come up with the best solution. It's not just one guy that you go to the clinic and he's like, all right, I'm going to cut you open and we're going to fix it. You're willing to do that. And in this profession, we can act the same way. We can collaborate with other people that really know what they're doing because you're not going to see, even though we've seen thousands of transactions and dealt with thousands of different people, there's always something that pops up new. And that's kind of what keeps the industry kind of, the business kind of cool. Like there's every now and then I go into a house and I'm like, whoa, I've never seen that before. Something cool, like I love those mid-century kitchens that have, like where you could put the mixer right in the counter and stuff like that, stuff that they don't make anymore.
Yeah, I love
that kind of stuff. I love that kind of stuff. So when I see stuff like that, I'm like, wow, that's something that, so you have to be open to not being the expert, right? You're not the definitive, expert and the final word on everything. You have to be open to learning something new.
And this is a little message for all you realtors out there. If you don't know something, don't say you know it or don't assume you know it. Don't make anything up. Right? Just say, I'm not sure. Like people rely on me because they know I went to home inspection school and I'll point out things. I was at a house. I'm like, I'm looking in the sump pit. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And I'm sending pictures to my home inspectors. They didn't know what it was either. It wound up being a mechanical sump system. It would work by vacuum. So the way, the water would flow out of the pipe. Yeah. And I'd never seen it, and neither had my inspectors. Wow. Yeah. And we all researched it. And the guy who actually did the inspection, he was a retired firefighter. He found it on the internet. But we don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. And back to the story of the home will never be heated. That couple called me during the polar vortex, and they said, you know where the warmest spot in the house is? That spot in the basement that could never be heated properly. He goes, that's the warmest spot in the house. It was hilarious, right?
Have you ever run across like a cistern, like in the yard, like buried, like a brick cistern that collected rainwater and stuff like that?
No, I haven't.
Oh, man, there's so many weird things to come across, but those are the old, like closer into the city, kind of like North Shore, a little bit northwest. Some of those homes that were built in the early 20s or 1920s by then. Like those kinds of things that like they collected rainwater because they were still kind of like not sure about the plumbing systems and stuff. And like, it's really kind of interesting. And like the older houses where, what is that? Why is there a piece of plywood in the middle of the brick? Well, because that was the coal chute. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where the coal came in.
Right.
Or some of the old houses that have that, the doorway by the kitchen. Well, that's where the milk and eggs came in, right? The dairy guy that used to do that, they used to deliver. Remember,
I sold an old building on Dempster. It was built at the turn of the century, and there were these big tanks down there, and I'm like, what the hell are these? And they were all cut off to the connections. I go, oh, those are heating oil tanks. That's what they had before furnaces, Yeah. Sometimes because we've been in so many houses and we know about architecture, we'll see cool things and we'll be like little kids in a museum. Right. And you're telling your clients, oh, look at this. They're like,
they
have no interest whatsoever.
We're nerding out and they don't care. Yeah, that's one of the things that I love to do is look at the wiring. Right, especially in new construction. You go down into somebody's basement and you look at it and there's like a rat's nest of wiring. You're like, oof. You know what I mean? But you go into something and everything's punched down. Back to the guy who labels everything. Everything's punched down nice and clean. You're like, okay, that tells me that most likely the stuff behind the wall is just as good.
I'm sure you've run into this in the older houses. I've been in a house that still had working knob and tube wiring. The original wires that ran exterior around little glass junctions, and it was still operable. Yeah. And here's what the inspector said. He goes, It's not code.
Just don't touch
it's
it.
not code anymore, but it works. You know, there's nothing to criticize about it. It's working. It's worked for 100 and something years. So it's interesting.
Old phone systems are a thing like that. I nerd out on the old phone systems, right? You see those little tiny wires that come into the house.
Yeah.
And the phone system actually used to have fuses in it. Sometimes I'll unscrew them and show like, this used to be when I was a kid and the power went out, you could pick up the phone and the phone still worked, right? These days the power goes out. Nothing's working, right? They built the phone system. The phone systems themselves were powered, right? And that's why there was a fuse there, so you didn't blow somebody's phone up if it got overcharged.
Yeah.
If too big of a charge came through the phone, lightning struck or something like that. But you don't see that stuff anymore. They don't even like. I remember when the big thing was, wiring house. Do I put Cat 5 wiring in the copper wiring, or do I run fiber through that? Think about all the guys who ran fiber through their house and then Wi-Fi popped off, right? Now you don't have to do any of that. Everything's Wi-Fi, so, it's you'll probably find we'll probably be in some houses and somebody will be like, what's that? Oh, that's an old fiber connection. Why? You don't even have that piece of equipment that can take the fiber connection and connect it to your computer so that you're networked. So all of those kinds of things are, and that just takes time. That goes back to like being in and out of enough houses and those kinds of things. And then sharing that knowledge, right? Sharing that knowledge with people who are new to the industry.
It's awesome.
Those kinds of things. That's to your point about working with new agents and stuff like that, sharing all of these things, this knowledge and all of that stuff that makes the deal important.
I like to look at when I work with buyers is I'm going to teach you how to be a savvy home buyer. And I give them like tutorials everywhere we go. I go, see this right here? This is X, Y, and Z. See this? This is a radon mitigation system. Here's what radon is. Here's how it works. Here's how you know it's working. And there's a clear tube and the liquid, I go into the whole thing. And like after 3 or 4 houses, I'll quiz them. So we'll be approaching the house. I go, what do you see that looks awry right now? Anything? And they'll go, wow, the shingles don't look in good shape. I go, excellent. I go, so what else?
You're learning.
We're like, what else? Yeah. And if I see, the driveway is settling, so the threshold to get in the garage is like a curb now. You got to hump over.
Right.
And I go, that's what happens often on steep concrete driveways and mud jacking, blah, blah, blah. So by the time, if you look at like 10 plus houses, they're almost on autopilot. They know what they're looking for. And it's a gas. It's a gas to teach them to be smart home buyers, What I
can't do in Arizona anymore, but what I used to love to do here is when it would snow and you'd show houses and it would snow. And we'd go up to the second store and I'd say, look at all the roofs, right? All the roofs that have snow still sitting on them. Great insulation. See that roof over there? It's got that square where you can see the tiles. That means there's no insulation between the heat coming up out of the house and the roof, and it's melting the snow off it. That means you're going to have a high heating bill, right? Like little things like that like you're like, oh, really? You do want the snow, obviously you don't want feet of snow sitting on your roof, but you don't want the snow to immediately melt off your roof because you're actually heating the surface of your roof.
Yeah, you're heating the outside.
Yeah. So, things like that that's fun to share that knowledge, that takes a lot of time to acquire. Because somebody showed me that. I didn't discover it. Somebody told me. So I'm now able to pass that knowledge on to somebody else, and that's great.
And that's probably one of the biggest spokes in the wheel that makes a polished real estate professional is that you can trust them. And when you're pointing out flaws in a property, there's no quicker way for people to get to trust you than that. We have in our industry often been compared to used car salesmen. And you and I have had plenty of experiences with agents that they're not our style. Let's put it that way.
Inaccurate.
Yeah.
It's not an inaccurate description.
So when you find a true polished professional agent and an advocate, I tell my people right up front. I say, we'll go out and look at properties and stuff like that. And, if you trusted me, I said, I'll walk through the fires of hell with you. I'll go as far as we need to go. It's not about the deal. It's about excellence, right? And I wanted to say this to you realtors out there. If your mission is money, then your excellence probably will not be as good as could be. But if your mission is excellence and that is what you're striving for, then the business will follow you. You'll always have business and you'll have more repeat business if your concern is about excellence.
Because the excellence generates the money.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's not the other way around. It can be costly. It can be costly to gain expertise, right? But your expertise, and if you're working to be the best that you can be and the best in the industry or the best, at the top level of performing, the money is going to, the money, quote unquote, will come, right? it just is what it is. That's how business works. If you're good at what you do, you're providing a value for those people. People will pay for that value. I mean, it's kind of like the old joke about divorce, right? I hate to throw a divorce joke on there for anybody who's gone through a painful divorce, but why is divorce so expensive? Because it's worth it. Right. That's that old joke, right? I mean, like sometimes things are worth paying for, and sometimes that expertise saves you so much money in the long run. Right. And that's really what it comes down to. Like, I think if the industry changes to a point where people really, they get the propaganda and some of the disinformation and misinformation that kind of comes out of stuff, that they can do it themselves and they don't need a realtor. Certainly there are people who could, guys who could build their own home, right? Guys who can take apart an engine and put it back together. That's not the vast majority of people.
Correct.
Right? The vast majority of people need help doing stuff, right? And you need the right kind of help. And it's worth paying for because it saves you in the long run, right? If I can sell your house for 10% more, 12% more than what, say, some cash institutional buyer wants to buy your house for, and I say, look, all we have to do is take some really good pictures, stage this place up, expose it to the marketplace, show the value of the neighborhood, the value of the school system that you live in, all of these things to people, and you're going to get 10, 12, 15% more money for your house and you pay me, 5, 4, 5, 6%, whatever the fee that I'm going to charge for that is, is it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it. Because I'm going to net out more. And on the buy side, if we, pass on a house because we know that there's a ton of work that needs to be done on it and a ton of deferred maintenance that you're going to have to deal with over the first 5 years of your ownership, and you're not going to have the resources to do that. And I can help you make a good decision to not maybe buy that house and to look for one that doesn't have as much deferred maintenance needed on the front side. That's good. But, I mean, all the different, you start thinking about all the scenarios, maybe somebody that is looking for a house that needs a lot of deferred maintenance because they can get into it cheaper. And they're one of those guys who likes doing a bunch of work, that's great. Perfect. And that comes down to, really over communicating with your client and listening to what it is that they want, specifically on the buy side, what it is that they are looking for and what it is, what's their risk tolerance? What's their workload tolerance? I mean, I know a bunch of guys who think that they're going to do work around their house, but the reality is like they come home after 10 hours of, working at the office, 10, 12-hour days all week. They're not going to spend their Saturday, reframing a basement. That just isn't going to happen for them.
I had a client, and then he became a realtor. And he joined Keller Williams, and I was mentoring him, and he knows about construction, and he called me up. He would call me up periodically about negotiations and whatever. And he said, I got a question for you. I have a client that they like 2 houses. One house needs work and, it needs a lot of work. And the other house is done to completion. And, he asked me what I thought, which one would be better. And I told him to buy the house that needed to work because he could put in some sweat equity and then he can get, he'll make some money.
Yeah.
And he goes, what would you do? I said, look, man, you're a hands-on do-it-yourself guy. This guy might not be or think he is, and he's not. So the way I would present that to him, I would say, if you have the time and the willingness and you're that type of person that you want to like have several hours of work every day, 7 days a week, and put in your own sweat equity and you get off on that, then that'll be a good option for you. But if you're not that way and you buy the house and it becomes a labor to your life, then it might not be worth it. You have to decide what kind of person you are and you leave it up to them. And he goes, wow, that's a really good idea. I go, never tell the client what to do. Just tell them the what ifs and let them make their own decision. But you have to know the if then statements, right? If you buy this house, then this could happen. Or even in a negotiation, if we come back real hard and staunch, they could walk. And if you're willing to walk, then let's do it. But if you lose the house because that happened, are you okay with that? And if you're not, then maybe we should, tone it down a little bit. You give them the if-thens, and then you let them decide. But you have to be educated and experienced to know what those if-thens are.
A funny sidebar, I was working with some clients, and me and the husband, the guy, were he was fixated on trying to find the perfect house, that the wife would love, right? And he's like, I really think that, this is a really good kitchen, and I think that all of this kind of stuff. And I'm like, look, we both know she's changing out the countertops no matter what house we buy, right? Like, so let's find the one that we're not going to rip out the most expensive countertops that are already existing.
That's hilarious
for what she's going to put. Yeah, she's never going to, whatever house you buy, she's going to put new countertops in,
like personalize it or whatever.
It was just her thing. You know what I mean? It was just, she was going to put new countertops in. The closets were going to get organizers, like even if they had organizers in them, they weren't going to be the right kind. Right. It was just one of those, it was just a person that wanted things their way. And he was like, you know what? You're right. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop trying to look at the countertops and figure out which countertops she's going to like, because it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, countertops, I'm not trying to I'm great at spending other people's money, right? Like, I'm not trying to throw like, hey, we should just don't worry about 10 G's in countertops, right? It's an important thing. But let's not, she's going to do it, right? So like, let's not worry about the countertops. Let's make sure the cabinets are the right cabinets so that we're not spending another 40 getting cabinets, right? Or 30 getting cabinets. Like, let's make sure that the bathroom, the vanities and stuff like that are fine. That if she wants to switch out the countertops, we're great. You know what I mean? Like, but we're not going to end up getting in cabinets, all of that kind of stuff. So, or the cabinets that are there are paintable, because a lot of cabinets aren't paintable. You know what I mean? They got a laminate on them or whatever. They're not paintable, so those kinds of things. And, that just goes back to, we could sit and swap stories all day, right? It goes back to those kinds of things of like listening to your client and listening to the dynamic between them. You know what I mean? Those kinds of things that are important, and understanding the dynamic that they have going on as a couple sometimes. We always joke about being our client's therapist a lot of times, listening to them about that kind of stuff. But, that's part of the business. It's part of understanding.
Right. And listening is another component of it. So listening is extremely important.
What I find, and what I have to stop myself from, right, a lot of times, is I can determine, and I'm making a blanket statement here, I realize that, I can determine a lot of times what they're going to end up with at the end of the day. So sometimes I know, like, these houses are going to be a waste of time to look at. But if I was to step up and say, these houses are going to be a waste of time to look at, I already know what you want. We need to go look at these houses, right? Sometimes that learning process, they have to be brought through that learning process, mm-hmm. right? And, sometimes you're in, I have to be aware that even though I might think that I know exactly what they want, sometimes they throw a curveball at you.
Right.
You know what I mean? I just recently put somebody in we looked at a house, me and the husband were looking at the house, and I was like, this is what you guys need. You know what I mean? It was split up. They had a couple of teenage kids and, boys and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, it's going to be perfect to put the boys down here. When they turn 17, they can sneak their girlfriend in. You won't even know, all of these kind of, like all of the, right? All of the kind of, I thought the house was perfect for him. Wife took one look at it, hated it, hated everything about the house, didn't like the layout, didn't like all, and I thought it was going to be the perfect house for him. Sometimes they throw you a curveball. Sometimes you don't know.
Yep, and I've had it the other way. Yeah. I've had it where I was out with the husband and she's like, she'll never go for this house. And then we wind up going, all of us, and she's like, I love this house. And he's looking at me like, I don't know what happened there. He's even miffed what happened, right? So you just never know.
What I learned early was that I may think that I know the house, but I never critique. Like, I never go, ugh, like, this house sucks, or this house is, because they may like it. You know what I mean? It may be their taste, just because it's not my, like, you walk in and, it's just like,
you could talk them out of their dream home, right? You got to be careful with that.
You got to be careful about that.
That's why, like with, with things like power lines and road noise and all that stuff, I just tell them, it might not bother you whatsoever, but it will bother people at resale time. Some people are going to be turned off. You guys do whatever you want to do.
You're narrowing the pool. The pool has to be somebody that's like you, that's not going to bother. There are some people who will not get anywhere near high power lines, right?
Right.
And whether that's legit or not legit, I wouldn't want to. For me, I don't want to hear the buzzing and all, but for some people, they don't want to be anywhere near that. They want to be near a cell tower.
Right. And people have asked me, like, is there something to the electromagnetic fields? And I go, I've read that there is and there isn't. There could be. I don't know. Do your research.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it has to be their comfort level at the end of the day. I just try not to overlay my personal expectations on what I think they should have, unless they're actually asking me for my expertise as to how that's going to affect the way they live in the house, or the way that house or that house payment will affect their life financially. Should they spend, if they're comfortable with a $33,000 a month mortgage payment, is $3,250 going to make a difference for them? Maybe the stretch is worth it. Maybe it's not.
Right. But you pointed out to them.
Yeah.
And you let them decide. There's only been a few times where they've asked me, would you buy this house? And I've said no. I personally wouldn't buy this house. If it's a house, let's say, on a real low water table where, it's been no rain for 5 or 6 days and that sump pump is cycling like every 2 minutes, and they've got 3 rusted sump pumps that they've taken out that they've left right next to the sump pit, I'm like, I don't want to be fighting water issues and keep replacing sump pumps, because if it's like this and it's dry, when you get a torrential rain, you're going to be biting your nails.
Yeah.
For me personally, I wouldn't buy this house. But if you're okay with fighting the water, with the water table, there's nothing you can do to fix it here. You can build drainage things and stuff, but the way it sits on the land and the way the land slopes down into the back of the house, it is what it is.
Yeah, and if you get a power loss, now your sump's not working, so you got a battery backup. Well, your battery backup's only going to last X amount of hours. So if you get a real power outage, now what? Now
right.
What are we doing? Are we talking that do you want a natural gas generator? And are you far enough out that it should be a propane generator? Like all of those kinds of things that I love solving those problems, and that's why we do what we do.
Right.
And the challenge of figuring all that kind of stuff out. I was going to say the thing about Arizona, we don't have to deal. There's very few basements. Right, a couple of houses that I've been in that have basements, the sump pumps there's spiders living down in there. There's no
right.
Right. It's a desert inside the sump pump too. I don't know why. I'm sure it's that's obviously code and all that kind of stuff that they have to put it in there. And when we do get a torrential rain every now and then, it is a weird. Talk about water is a weird spot. But when I sold on the North Shore and when I sold in the Chicago area, I usually said there's a couple of things that are going on here. One, it's newer construction. They built it correctly, and the basement doesn't get water because the sump pump system works. Now, if the power goes out, we have to take that into account, right? Or it's an old house that they've gone back into, fixed, and made it so that the basement doesn't get water. Or the seller's probably not being honest. It's either been fixed, built correctly, or it gets water. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
And you're going to deal with the water in the long run. So do you want to deal with it now? Do you want to deal with it later? Do you want to those kinds of things. So basements are always a weird thing.
All right, my brother. Well, we have covered a lot. We could really talk about this forever. We have literally billions of data points in our head throughout our careers. So wrap it up for us just summarize it for us.
If you're looking to buy a house and list a house, like if you're looking to buy a house, be careful about the disinformation and the misinformation that's coming out of the propaganda about that kind of stuff. We take this seriously, and we're here to be your advocate, right? We're here to help so that you don't make a bad decision, and really help guide how that decision is going to work. So, don't be afraid to engage a realtor. Don't be afraid to talk to a professional, and don't be afraid to ask questions and make sure that they are a professional. Every profession has people that aren't good at what they do. And I'm not trying to throw people under the bus, but it takes time and mentoring and people seeking, like what we've talked about, people seeking out the education, become good at what they do, right? Nobody's an expert out of the gate, right? And nobody who is really an expert is afraid of learning new things. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but listen, we do this and it's not my job to make sure you love the house the day you move into it. It's my job to make sure that you love that house, everything about it, the issues that come with it, the challenges that come with it, the raising your family in it a year, 2 years, 5 years after you buy it, that you're like, I love this place, right? My wife and I lived in a place in Evanston for a long time, and I missed the place. It was a great place. It was a great house. I did a lot of work to it, did a lot of stuff, fixed water in the basement kind of stuff, crawl space issues, put another sump in, all the things that you have to deal with a house, right? But I loved living there. I loved the neighborhood. I loved all that stuff. And that's what I want for my client. For our clients, I want them to live in a house for 10 years and love the fact that they lived in the house, because eventually they're probably going to sell it. And that's going to be their memories. Like, that's going to be where they raised their kids. That's going to be all of those things that we get to, if I'm being realistic, we get forgotten. The realtor, we get forgotten, in the long run. But if knowing that 10 years from now they raised kids, or 15 years from now they love that house, and it was a place that had great memories, sad memories, positive memories, great thing. That's, as corny as that sounds, you know what I mean? That's what I love to do. Right? All the nonsense, all the little things, all the dealing with agents, all the aggravations and all that stuff. At the end of the day, right? If somebody loves their house and they raised a family there, or they did whatever they wanted to do in that house over that period of time and they loved it, then I did my job.
That's awesome, brother.
And that's, what more do you, really, what more do you want? What more would you call a success?
We were in a high pressure environment on the trading floor, and the financial gain could be way better than most any real world job, but it wasn't rewarding. This is rewarding. This is not even a job. This is like a passion. We're blessed to be in it.
And we never even touched on stuff like getting people out of stuff when they've gotten themselves into a bad situation, and we're able to get them out of that bad situation and open their future up for them, because they're not going to be punished for being in that bad situation for a decade of financial nightmare. We haven't even touched on it. Like you said, we could. The two of us could sit here all day and talk about, let's get a cup of coffee and keep talking.
Yeah, and we'll do this. We'll keep this going, and we'll do some real estate stories. And guys, just Marty flew in from Arizona to do these podcasts here in my studio in Lamont, Illinois. We'll wrap it up here. I just wanted to throw in another little sidebar, and this is for all you realtors watching this. If you guys have any questions about anything that you think I could help you with, just look me up and give me a call, shoot me an email. Marty and I collectively, we want to raise the level of performance of our industry. That's part of what our previous podcast was about. And anytime we can help one of our fellow realtors, you just, reach out to us, look us up, send us an email, and we'll be happy to help you.
Yeah, I love answering the questions. I really do. I really love helping other agents. I really love answering the questions. I joke about it. My poor wife, has to listen to me talk about real estate nonstop, all the time. Like, I get the pulling on the hand, pulling on the shirt. Like, it's time, we got to go. It's time, stop talking about real estate. You're boring everybody. But I love it. And to your point, the professionalism of it, all of that stuff, and being able to really help people out, and make a difference in people's lives. There aren't very many careers where you get to touch. I was going to say, there are very many careers where you get to touch a lot of people, right? But you get to influence things in their life, right? You know what I mean? Like, there aren't
important things, though.
Important things that make a difference in the way that they're in their life. And this is one of those things. And it should be respected. And I think that our profession is under assault right now, and we should fight back about that. Because we really do make a difference for people. We really do make a difference. If you take it to the level of professionalism, we really make a difference in people's lives, in their financial futures, in the things that they do, in the raising of their families, in neighborhoods, making a difference and all that kind of stuff. It should be taken seriously, and it's a profession that's worth fighting for.
Well said, my friend. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Warrior Podcast. Remember, there's a warrior inside us all. We'll see you at our next podcast. Dear friend Marty, we're going to grill some steaks right now and make some mushrooms and baked potatoes, and we'll talk about our podcast. So thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you at our next podcast.
Peace.